Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome to today's Rainmaker Show. This is your host, Greg Mack, and I wanted to share something with you today. I had an experience over the weekend. I was in St. Louis, just outside of St. Louis, Missouri, teaching a one-day course to some of our exercise professional and coach colleagues, and we were talking about some technical skills and methods that I teach to help people interface with their clients' motor system to help them use their bodies better and more safely while they exercise. And we got into an interesting discussion, I think, that fits, again, in the sales context and the interview context as you try to figure out what this client's needs picture is, how it fits with what you do professionally or not, and figure out if a decision can be made to still continue on professionally or whether that shouldn't happen. And in this particular case, this was a group of trainers who worked for a company that hired and managed and educated the trainers and then signed contracts with gym owners to provide the trainers for the gym to relieve the gym ownership of that particular responsibility. So the trainers worked kind of as contractors inside a variety of gym settings contracted by this particular company. And so they realized and pretty quickly that there's a real distinction to be made and a challenge when interfacing with an individual in your community who kind of has their needs picture already painted. And we refer to this in methodologies that we lean on for this particular course in Rainmaker 201, 301, somewhat regards the idea of, don't paint seagulls into your client's picture if they don't want them there. And what do you do with a client when they have a specific thing that they want from you, a specific stereotyped idea of what you are and what you do, especially in the commodity mindset that many consumers have about trainers and coaches. And in MadLab, the MadLab system, you guys are addressing this problem through the mandatory one-on-one introduction process before they get into group exercise. And in this particular setting, very quickly, the trainers started to bring up the idea that, wait a minute, many of our members of the gyms that we are contracted to work out of, they want weight loss. And in the consumer's mind, weight loss means burn as many calories per second squared as possible while they're exercising, which generally translates into a lot of high velocity, high intensity, low rest interval, very fatiguing exercise sessions. And this is what the consumer believes is necessary and that they have to do, and they might even enjoy that process of being stimulated at this level where they are literally exhausted and they can't move and they're really sore, and this is what they want from the exercise process or expect. When, as exercise professionals, we're happy to deliver that to them, but we're also cognizant, of their physiology and their potential frailties and their vulnerabilities, because when we're exercising them, we're putting a tremendous amount of stress on their system, mechanical and chemical stressors, which some parts may be ready for in their body and other parts might not be ready. And we don't find out, unfortunately, and the consumer doesn't find out until they get hurt. And this isn't cool. We don't want our clients getting injured during the exercise process. And this is the dirty secret in the exercise world, and that many people are getting injured and exercising in an injured state, which seems antithetical to the entire goal of health and wellness and fitness. That if you're orthopedically degraded, your insides are being worn out so that you look good on the outside, that seems contradictory to the overall goal. And sometimes consumers aren't even aware of this idea until it's too late. And so how do we address this in the sales process, in the interviewing process, where we want to meet the consumer's needs and we're trying to understand their needs picture, how they want to use us, why they want to use us, when, where, all of those things, very important concepts. But we're listening to them in the consultation, taking some history and realizing, oh, wait a minute, we might have some potential issues here in terms of their motor control, their physical capabilities to actually engage in, a progressively increasing high volume, high intensity exercise process in semi or totally supervised situations, let alone unsupervised situations, where many clients ask you to build them an exercise program that they can kind of do on their own. And so how do we balance this out where the consumer's trying to come in and they want to hit the street running. They want to immediately begin burning calories and burning fat, and have this pressure on them that if they don't feel extremely sweaty and exhausted after the session, that the session's wasted. And they don't want to spend all of this time, in the beginning, several weeks maybe even, ensuring that you understand their physical capabilities through assessment and a movement observation, and any strategies you're employing to try to help improve those things, to create a safe physical capability so that they can race their car harder, right? Because that's what they want to do, burn the gas, race the car hard. This is a critical discussion to have, because here's the problem. If you just give in 100% to the consumer's childlike ego state of immediate gratification and expediency, that they want to begin racing their car at the highest possible speeds immediately and put some of their car parts at risk for damage, and you just give into that and start doing it, when they get injured, who are they going to blame? Who are they going to hold responsible for that? Because that's the thing. They're hoping that you'll race their car expediently as possible, get them to their goals, ripping off body fat in this particular case. Could be hypertrophy or some kind of sports performance metric as well they're searching for, which they all want in the shortest possible period. And you're doing this because that's what they want, and they get hurt. They're going to blame you. And so there's a legal liability issue here on top of just a reputational one, where they're hiring you as a commodity. And we've talked about this at great length, and we'll continue to do so, because again, that's how the consumer's seeing you, as a shelf item, someone who they can hire to race their car and make them do things they wouldn't normally do under their own volition, in a sense. And so how do we have this conversation? And so this becomes important to bring up, because the pressure that this particular group was feeling, and maybe you guys feel this pressure in the MadLab group as well, I'm sure it's probably a systemic issue, is, my gosh, the gym owners that hire this company to put these trainers in here want their members served, and they don't want their members coming to the ownership complaining that the trainers won't do what they want. Does this sound familiar? And then the trainers feel like, geez, I would like to have more control over who I choose to have as clients, but I don't want to make the people who hire me angry by not serving them because I turn them down. This is a tricky conversation to have. Now, maybe you're a trainer who doesn't care about all that. You'll race them as hard as possible, and if they get hurt, well, then they stop coming, or you work around it, or you ignore it, or any number of decisions you might make in that regard. It's risky, though. And I don't think you have to take the risk, because I think in the sales process, especially in the face-to-face consultation, there's a place we can talk about this. And this is brought up in the pain step, if you're familiar with the Rainmaker 201 system. And then again, it can be brought up in the present your stuff step, where you start talking about how you're going to solve their problem. Because I got to tell you, if somebody hires me to work with them to develop exercise programming, to improve whatever things they want me to improve and change whatever things they want me to change, and they're telling me they're not going to get injured and they're injury proof and there's no way that that's going to happen and you just got to crush me, or you're a terrible trainer, I'm in a position where I can just say, thanks for coming in, I'm not interested. Even if I try to appeal to them and their sensibilities and the logic of, why don't you give me some time to make sure I can figure out how to dose you properly, and if there's some areas that you have some control issues, we can start to try to address those and figure out if a medical person needs to be involved in helping you as we dovetail towards this process of creating stimulation exercise dose at the levels that are appropriate for you, right? The consumer doesn't always understand, right, that we're trying to get the minimum dose to get the maximum result, not an overdose or some maximum dose to get some maximum result. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's not logical, not rational. So again, you're talking about dealing with the child ego state of this particular person. And so all we can do is really ask them if they would be willing to paint a process of assessment and a little bit lower dose in the beginning to make sure that they can tolerate these things that you want to do in the various parts of their body before you start ramping things up, that they get to earn the physical right to go into high volume, high intensity progressions. And so that's how we do it in the interview sales process. We ask them permission to see if they'll let something like that into their needs picture. And it might go something like this. Mr. Prospect, I'm certainly glad that you came in today, and I appreciate all the things you're sharing and the goals that you have. I think they're worthwhile, and losing body fat and weight and getting in high levels of condition is important for your long-term health. Does it make any sense that we make sure that your car is really ready to race, that the cars are aligned, the tires are aligned, I mean, that your transmission works and all the gears work properly, and that you can tolerate these things that we're going to do for your safety, more importantly, than even my legal obligation to make sure I don't hurt you, because I do have a legal obligation not to injure you while you're here under my care. And would you be willing to allow that to happen, where we spend a little bit of time, maybe not trying to burn 1,000 calories per minute, but just making sure that you're safe to go? Now, if somebody can sit there and look at you square in the face and say, nah, I don't care about all that stuff. I don't care. If you hurt me, it'd be fine. I'll deal with it. I got to tell you, you're at a Y in the road here. And this could be someone that really doesn't respect your needs. And so if they answer that way, I would tell you to tell them the truth in a nurturing way and say, look, I certainly appreciate your need to get this going and that you want to get results quickly. But you have to understand something. I hope you will. Tell me if you do or you don't. If you get injured early on because you're not really ready for some of the things that we're doing, because I didn't have time to really assess you properly and prepare you, what are you going to do? And why is that okay for you? And you got to have a pretty straightforward, honest conversation here. Maybe you can move them off of this childlike expediency model that they're in right now and get their adult ego state to actually logically and rationally come in here and analyze what's going on so that they can make a better decision about how to be in this relationship and respect your needs. Because ultimately, that's the question you're going to ask them. Do you respect my professional technical needs in this relationship? And if they tell you no, I got to tell you, no matter what's going to happen with ownership or your bosses or whatever about the sale and serving this member, I tell you to say no. This is a real disaster ready to happen. And so if you're a trainer or you're working as a coach with a gym, I would tell you to go to the coach leadership and the ownership of the gym and tell them about the potential of this scenario and ask them about some guidance from them and what they would want you to do. And if they're okay with you insisting on ensuring the safety of this client, this member, prior to the member insisting on engaging in some instantaneous high volume, high intensity, stressful exercise program. Now, if the ownership and the coaches are saying to you, I don't care, you better do everything my members say, I don't know if you're in the right place. This is one of the big things I think is a problem for our industry, is too long we've allowed this to happen, to be pushed around by the consumer and made to be this clowny serf, this servant that just bends over backwards to do everything they want, even if it's not good for them. We're in a professional relationship with somebody. And so we've got to learn how to balance this. And in the sales transaction is where this balancing act and this back and forth has to happen, so that at the end of this conversation, you're comfortable saying yes or no, and they're comfortable saying yes or no to moving to the next step in the relationship. If you don't feel good about where this conversation's going and that it's a really good fit in terms of their professional needs and their attitude and their emotional and psychological perspective towards the process and what you need technically, professionally to ensure their safety, it's got to be a no on both your parts. And so insist on that and make sure that when you're in these conversations, in these interviewing processes, don't just assume. Ask permission. Does it make any sense for me to spend a little bit of time assessing you, checking out your physical capabilities, seeing if there's any vulnerabilities or any issues in your control processes that I need to address and shore up, or maybe have a medical provider look at before we start racing you at 1,000 calories per minute. So try that out. That's my recommendation. It's important for you to have a value system and exert that as much as the consumer, and that you can come to a professional yes or no about how this relationship works. See you guys.